There was a time in our lives when being a comic book fan or even just someone who casually enjoyed superhero media meant dreaming about one thing: seeing our favorite superheroes brought to life in live action. We grew up during the golden age of that dream, watching the likes of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Christopher Reeve's Superman, Tim Burton's Batman, and Fox's X-Men. Those movies didn't just entertain us, they validated our love for these characters. We wanted more, and for a while, more seemed like the best thing that could happen. And then we got it. A lot more even, until it became a little bit too much and we started to hate it. Whether it was the gradual collapse of the MCU after Endgame or being a DC fan and realizing that the only consistently praised projects were Batman related, the once epic superhero genre began to feel hollow. The spectacle remained, but the soul was gone. And the one thing fans never thought they'd face came to be, and that was superhero fatigue. Now, whether you believe superhero fatigue is real or not, one thing's undeniable: superhero films just haven't hit the same in recent years. There was a time when the release of a Marvel movie felt like a global event, or when DC's next film teased endless speculation. But now, audiences are bored, burnt out, and no longer emotionally invested in all these movies. And that's partly because of expectations, which have changed. We expected too much and were promised even more: continuity, interconnectedness, payoff, everything needed to build towards the next big saga. But instead of storytelling, we got setups. Instead of character arcs, we got cameos. The illusion shattered. And what did the audience do? They left. Not from superhero content entirely, but from its traditional form. They fled to shows like The Boys and Invincible, which didn't just reimagine the genre, but deconstructed it. These were gritty, emotional, bold, and most importantly, different stories. They felt like a rebellion against the sanitized, overproduced committee or blockbuster that had dominated the genre for a decade. And maybe that's what reaching the height of a cinematic universe does. Maybe implosion is inevitable, but if that was truly the end, we wouldn't be talking about what's happening right now, because something has definitely changed. It is a subtle change, but undeniable. In 2025, there is this new energy in superhero storytelling. It's not about box office dominance, it's about telling stories again. Stories with heart, weight, and emotional resonance. 3 films represent this shift: Thunderbolt, Superman, and Fantastic Four. And each of them in their own way is part of something bigger. Let me explain. Thunderbolt should not have worked. It had everything going against it: a cast of lesser-known anti-heroes, characters most audiences didn't know or care about, and worst of all, to understand them meant digging through a mountain of previous Marvel content, a tedious marathon of shows and side stories that had lost their flavor. Many dismiss this movie as a filler, another soulless entry in Marvel's overstuffed timeline, and in some ways, they weren't wrong. But what emerged from that skepticism was something surprisingly grounded. Thunderbolts wasn't about saving the world or tying into some multiverse saga. It definitely did at the end, but not the entire movie. It was about broken people, characters dealing with trauma, guilt, and identity. The film tackled mental health not as a gimmick, but as a central theme. It asks what happens to the soldiers when the war is over, what happens to the pawns when the game has changed. The film peeled back the masks of the genre, showing us the psychological consequences of being a tool in a machine. It didn't shy away from the cynicism, but it also didn't wallow in it. It offered a look at redemption, not in grand gestures, but in personal reckoning. Also, let's be honest, it's the first time Marvel gave us a team up where you couldn't remember half of the names of these characters, but still cared. And that's a win. That's not just bold, it's kind of necessary. With the DCU in pieces and fans burned by years of misfires, James Gunn's Superman had the weight of an entire franchise on his shoulders. Many were skeptical, and rightfully so, but what we got wasn't just a new take on the Man of Steel, it was a spiritual reboot of what Superman means. And there was a time where we had to deal with a very different kind of Superman, and a lot of people, to them, this is the definition of Superman. But Gunn came in and in his own place brought a Clark Kent, which is kind, conflicted, humble, a man who believes in doing good, not because it earns praise, but because it's the right thing to do. Gunn's Superman reminded us that morality can still be aspirational, and in a world that often favors age and complexity, sometimes goodness is the revolution. What stood out wasn't the spectacle, but the sincerity. The film wasn't just a launchpad, it was more of a statement. Superman actually matters. Not because he's powerful, but because he chooses to be hopeful in a world that tempts despair. And for the first time in years, DC gave us a film that didn't try to fix Superman. it just let him be, and somehow no neck snapping. If any superhero property felt doomed to fail, it was Fantastic Four. After multiple failed reboots, audiences were exhausted, or worse, indifferent. But the 2025 version understood what none of those previous attempts did. The story isn't about powers, it's about people. It leaned heavily into the emotional core of the team, not as superheroes but as a family, a strange, dysfunctionally brilliant, sometimes abrasive family, navigating both cosmic dangers and human insecurities. This wasn't a slick, stylish reboot for the sake of rebranding, it was a return to heart. The film focused on sacrifice, leadership, and the emotional toll of responsibility. Reed's burden as the intellectual leader, Sue's struggle for agency, and the rest of it just brilliantly sewn into this movie. It was rich, textured, and deeply resonant, and in doing so, it didn't just redeem the franchise, it elevated it. That's why a lot of people are praising just how good the movie is. But something really is happening. And it's bigger than just these three movies. Studios are finally starting to reckon with the consequences of their own formula. The obsession with what's next, the teasers, the end credit scenes, the endless build-up came at the cost of what's now. Superhero movies became stepping stones, trailers for something bigger that never arrived. The audience was promised an epic, interconnected journey, but instead got a conveyor belt of setups and soft reboots with no emotional payoff. Naturally, fans began to drift away. But the twist is, they didn't leave the superhero genre entirely. They just sought something better. They found a new paradise in stories like The Boys, Invincible, and even animated fare like Across the Spider-Verse, are just stuck to reading comic books. Projects that dare to tell a different kind of story. Gritty, emotional, unapologetically real. These weren't glossy power fantasies, they were reflections, sometimes cynical, sometimes tragic, refracted through the superhero lens. In contrast to Marvel's worn-out templates and DC's frequent reinventions, these newer narratives cut deeper. They made us feel something again, and they forced the bigger studios to confront a brutal truth. The audience has grown up. These new films represent more than a shift. They are a quiet rebellion. They are slower, more deliberate. They are asking deeper questions. Who are these people? What do they want? And what does it cost to wear the cape? And they answer these questions with sincerity in their movies, using more moral ambiguity. And that's why the shift resonates. It mirrors us. We have matured. We have seen the grandeur of Infinity War and Endgame. We have seen what the MCU had to offer. And we have also seen the uncompromising scale of Zack Snyder's Justice League and whatever the DCU was. The razor-sharp commentary of The Boys and the emotional brutality of Invincible. We have lived through the highs and now we crave something in addition. With the MCU about to reboot the entire project and Superman being the start of DCU's new reboot, whatever it is, it will work if they take in what they have given us this year from these three movies and imply it into every story going forward. Stories that feel real and grounded and are not just there for spectacle. What matters is that studios are willing to risk, and with risk comes missteps, but missteps in the right direction are better than perfection on a dead-end road. So are we back? Maybe not fully. Maybe we are on the way. The films of 2025 aren't just course corrections, they are proof of concept, proof that the superhero genre needs to be reimagined with the humanity, with vulnerability, and with purpose. We are entering a new era of superhero movies, one that trades universe building for emotional clarity, that prioritizes character over canon, that makes us feel again, and maybe that's all we have ever wanted. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. What do you think of all of this? Do you think that 2025 is the best year for superhero movies? And if you really enjoyed this video in any way, you could give this video a like, you could subscribe for deep dives like this, or just to help grow the channel in general. But until next time, I'm out.